Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Mindset Elevation Coach, Intentional Living Guide, Linda Joy, and also the publisher, Aspire Magazine, the premier inspirational digital magazine for women since 2006. I don't know about you, my friends, but do you identify as a highly sensitive woman, empath, intuitive, or creative? I'm raising my hand there. Joining me today is Bonnie Snyder, and you're going to learn 3 ways to understand yourself more fully so you can connect more deeply to your unique magic. And isn't that what we all want? We all want to be able to live an authentic, intentional life. Bonnie has a background in education and counseling, is a graduate of the Authentic Happiness Coaching Program, and a diplomate in energy psychology. She is an intuitive professional life balance coach, and her clients call her a catalyst of transformation. She partners with highly sensitive women to release limiting thoughts about being highly sensitive and supports them in owning and celebrating their gifts, empowering them in their relationships with themselves and others. Bonnie, welcome. I am so glad you're here today.
Oh, Linda, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited about being here with you today.
Well, we've been connected for a while. I've always been drawn to your work and your message, and lately we've gotten to know each other on a deeper level. And one of the things I always love to start my conversations with is I believe that every woman, especially spiritual entrepreneurs, their own journey led them to the work they're doing. So let's talk about that. When did you first know you were highly sensitive?
Well, that's a really interesting question. When did I actually get the label, or when did I know that I was highly sensitive? I think even as a child, I knew I was highly sensitive. I can remember my aunt telling me when I was 3 years old how in tune I was with everybody, and I would get things ready for them, or I knew what they needed. But I don't think until really I got to be a therapist that I started to realize that it was a trait. And I think that over these last years, that 5-6 years, that it has become more noted that we have brain differences. But for me, it has been quite a journey. I think for many of us who are highly sensitive, we've been told you're highly sensitive, you're overly emotional, which are all wonderful keys for us to identify and understand ourselves. Because I think recognizing that we are 20% of the population and highly sensitive is important. I was just recording a podcast for my own podcast station, HSP, Owning Our Sensitivity. And I really didn't realize I was teaching school. And there was an incident with one of my students, and our administrator had walked in for an observation. And I was very careful with this one little boy in the classroom who, if you've ever taught school, you know, there's somebody in your class who sometimes you wish wasn't there. But he and I got along, pretty well and did well with redirection. Well, that day he wasn't doing, he just wasn't behaving. So as the administrator came in, he dragged him out of the classroom, and it was quite embarrassing. And at that point, he told me I was a powder puff, another key word for us who are highly sensitive, and that I needed to toughen up. So no, I didn't realize, and that was, when I was much younger, that was my first career, that I was highly sensitive then, nor did I really understand why my class did so well, why he and I did so well. All I could feel was the shame and embarrassment of him yanking this child out of my classroom. And it was in Florida. And Linda, I don't know if you have ever heard of these white pod schools. There's 4 classes, sometimes 5 in the middle of a big room with petitions. I think it's a Southern thing, not a Northern thing. Have you
Yeah,
ever?
no, I hadn't heard of it.
Yeah. So anyway, he dragged this kid into the middle of what we called the pod. And in those days, you could spank children in Florida. He whacked his bottom. And my evaluation was great, but I was so ashamed, Linda. I was embarrassed, which I think many of us who are highly sensitive don't understand that it's because of our gifts. And I didn't realize till I was doing that podcast. I had worked through the shame because I think sometimes shame and embarrassment and feeling like we're different, which I have most of my life. And many highly sensitives feel that way, that we don't fit in. Now, you and I have talked about introverts, and many highly sensitive people are introverts. I'm not, but that I think we get that confused sometimes, and we don't always remember we can be highly sensitive and an introvert. So, and let me go back to that story. So I didn't realize the gifts that I took with me as a teacher that were gifts to my students, and how it assisted their learning and how it helped shape this little guy's behavior to being more appropriate because of who I was. But no, I didn't realize it then. I don't think I probably started to realize it until graduate school, but I had another experience with he was the head of the department, who basically said some of the same thing to me. You need to toughen up some. And again, I don't think in graduate school did I really realize how sensitive I was. I was told I was highly sensitive. I was told I was overly emotional. I was told, why don't you just get over it? In fact, I was laughing. You'll appreciate this. I was doing one of my podcasts writing about that, and my husband was joking with me. Well, I don't know if he was more concerned. A very dear professional alternative practitioner, retired, and I wish him the best. But I was so sad. And my husband said, can't you just get over it? And we sort of, but that's because I'm here now recognizing, as I look back, in my life, where were the points that being sensitive, just people were very critical of me for that. And tears would come easily. I'll never forget, in that principal's office, I had all I could do to hold the tears back. I think if I had had more understanding, I would have been gentler with myself. And that comes with recognizing, there are 20% of us, as we've spoken, that our brains are different.
Yeah, and that's so critical for just understanding of self, right? So that you could release the shame and non-judgment. So for those who are listening, most people know introvert, extrovert, and then we have the highly sensitive. Is there a critical difference between an introvert and a highly sensitive? Because I know a highly sensitive can be an extrovert or an introvert. So how do you define highly sensitive in relation to extrovert and introvert?
This would be my own perception, but I think Elaine Aron and Dr. Arthur Aron, who have done the original research, would be able to speak to that more in depth. I do know that highly sensitive, our brains are different. Introverts is about going within. And as an extrovert, I've had to learn that. But highly sensitive, not only do we not like crowded places, but many introverts, they don't sense what other people are thinking or feeling. I'm not sure that they have some of the multisensory that highly sensitives do, where we tap into everything around, not only what's seen, not only what we hear, not only what we use our five senses with, but we have a sense of what else is going on intuitively, empathically. We sense other people's emotions. And not being an introvert, I would actually turn that maybe back to you, Linda. I just suspect that many introverts don't have those qualities, and that's not a good or a bad. It's just a difference in how we process.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, because I have family members that it's both my grandchildren I call highly empathic. One is more of an introvert, my grandson, highly empathic. My granddaughter, I would say God, she is so tuned in, empathic, extrovert, but I see highly sensitive traits in her. But she is so in tuned and connected, like to nature, to animals. For myself, I don't identify as a highly sensitive. I am definitely an empath. I'm an ambivert. Now, many
Yes.
people think I'm an extrovert because I run 5 brands. I'm always out there. But my soul, my essence, has introvert tendencies. Like I love my alone time. I love, and actually it's part of my daily life. And at the same time, I can hold space for large events, large projects, which is surprising to some of my friends that identify as an introvert. Does that make sense? Because usually you don't want to be part of anything big. So I walk this weird line. Now, the highly sensitive, I have a lot of friends that identify as a highly sensitive. And I'm so glad so much research has been coming out. Like there's a new book that I just featured in the top 10 called Sensitive by Jen Groneman, I believe.
Yes.
And so it's always been important to me over the years to highlight books and authors and women in the world that are doing work on being an empath, an intuitive, highly sensitive, because like you just shared, so many of us have this shame and self-judgment because we're not wired like everyone else.
Well, I think you bring up an important point. All of us are different, unique. We know that, but our wiring is different. And particularly for highly sensitive, there's so much research now. And I love the book Sensitive because it just came out in March. So there's actually in research, there's a short serotonin transmitter called SERT, and it was discovered in the 1990s with highly sensitive people can easily read, react, and predict other people's emotions, which I find incredible.
I love all the research-based background because it gives some people who struggle with even talking about any of this, it gives them something to hold on to. We're going to talk about them more. We're going to take our first break. I am with Bonnie Snyder of diamondpathways.com. Be sure to visit her website, learn more about her offerings and the sacred work she's doing in the world. We'll be back in a moment.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Inspiration for a woman's soul. Aspire Magazine, inspiring and supporting women on the path of self-discovery. Claim your free digital subscription today, which includes access to thousands of dollars of personal development bonus gifts from Team Inspiration partners. Claim your Aspire Magazine subscription today at subscribetoaspire.com.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
Consistently attract soulmate clients, begin showing up on brand, monetizing on your calling. Welcome all spiritual coaches, leaders, healers, light workers, and practitioners to a show that turns you on in your business and amplifies your magnetism. I'm host, catalyst, and spiritual business coach Rosalind Fung, and I'm here to journey with you into the juicy and help you discover where the real gaps are. Ignite your mindset and soul with strategies and systems as each episode takes you to the sweet spot that activates your soulgasmic business by tuning in on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Mountain. Join me for your light language activation and let's magnetize and monetize.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back, my friends. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, and with me today is Bonnie Snyder. She works with highly sensitive women to release limiting thoughts about being highly sensitive and supports them in owning and celebrating their gifts empowering them in their relationships with themselves and others. So Bonnie, you were just talking about the research done about highly sensitives, how we're wired. So how has that led to the work you're doing now? In other words, what was the transition that you said, I am meant to work with other highly sensitives?
That's a wonderful question, because I realized with my own sensitivity, I was attracting clients who were having some of the issues that I had journeyed through. And so the more I started to pay attention to this, the more research I started to do. And what I realized was that understanding ourselves, recognizing those qualities was paramount for our success. So I felt a real passion, Linda, and excitement about focusing on this as my work. It gives me joy, because I think as we recognize, and then the next piece is nurture ourselves, which we all need to do as women, but for highly sensitive women, it's vitally important. That's how we stay empowered in our body, doing what it is, holding on to, well, not even holding on to, but just trusting our bodies and our intuition, trusting our empathic abilities, recognizing as we nurture where we set a boundary that keeps ourselves safe. And I don't mean a boundary against, but a boundary that keeps us healthy and happy. And then honoring those gifts, honoring like I did as I did that podcast, and recognizing, wow, what did I bring to that situation that made it a success? And I think I have had a lot of pain in my heart around my own experience. So if I can partner with women, and I love doing it in groups where we recognize each other in a non-judgmental way, are able to mirror to people what we see. And it's important for us to see our blind spots.
So beautifully said. And I'm curious, if someone's listening right now and they're like, I wonder if I'm highly sensitive, what would you say the top 3 traits are that you feel the majority of highly sensitive have? So that way, if someone's listening right now, it gives them a little insight.
I think
Bonnie?
shame.
Oh, Bonnie,
Yes.
hold on, Bonnie. For some reason, your audio keeps cutting out.
Okay, let me go back. The problem is I had to move.
Yeah, and what happens is because we don't edit, so
All right, I'm moving back. Unfortunately, the lawn guys came. That was my concern.
that's okay. I can't hear that, but I have to, let me, yeah, don't move, because twice the audio cuts out, so it's just dead air.
Okay. All right, so we're
So
back.
I gotta just write down a time, because she'll have to go into this file.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, try not to move. Okay, so what are the top 3 traits that you've discovered as a highly sensitive that maybe someone else listening could recognize in themselves?
I think, and this has come back from the podcasts I've done, people have recognized that when we're being told you're highly sensitive or you're overly emotional, that seems to be a trigger for those of us who are highly sensitive, but it also is a key to the gifts that we're holding. But I would say that's one of the top traits. The other is we think that idea, and again, it's on a continuum, but many highly sensitive are intuitive, empathic, creative. We sense a lot. That is a huge trait of those of us who are highly sensitive. We know ahead of time what's going to happen, or what we see that other people don't see. I think that's a really, really important one. When I was doing authentic happiness training, one of the things that I learned was when we have gifts, which we all have, they come naturally to us. So we don't pay attention to it because it comes easy for us. So I think it's important for those who are highly sensitive and listening to really think about, are you the one who sees the bigger picture? Are you the one who senses things that are not said? Are you the one feeling the emotions of others? So I think that's a huge piece. And the other is, and this is just because our nervous systems get dysregulated more quickly because of the amount of information, multisensory information that we're taking in, is that we get exhausted easily. Emotion may take us down. It could be that big crowded place where there's so many people, we either feel the energy, which I do, and just don't enjoy that. And some people are picking up the thoughts of everyone. And I think that's a real key. And again, it's not so much, we're on a continuum. And I want to say, Linda, also, I want us to recognize who we are, well, whoever we are, but if we're highly sensitive, to recognize our traits. But I don't want to stay labeled. I think recognition is important, and then important to move forward, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does make a lot of sense. Because sometimes we can give ourselves a label that gives us an excuse of how to navigate life, right? And we
Yes.
stay in the excuse instead of finding the empowering gifts of whatever the label may be, right? So for
Agreed.
myself, it took me quite a long time. I've been on the spiritual personal development path 31 years. And at the beginning, I didn't understand how energy affected me, right? And then as I started diving in, I'm like, okay, so I'm fine with large crowds. Do I want to be in it? Do I choose? Most often not, but like I used to run events for 300 to 400 women and I loved it. But what I discovered is, as I listened to myself, is I need lots of spaciousness. That's one of my core values: spaciousness in my day, spaciousness in my schedule, spaciousness in my thoughts. And since I recognize that in myself, it's like you're saying, like recognizing, I was able to give that self to me. So give that to me. And what I noticed, Bonnie, is I'm more aligned. I'm more emotionally, spiritually balanced, because I'm not going against my wiring, right? Like pushing, striving, chasing. I was in that energy in my 20s, 30s, and probably 40s. That's not who I'm energetically wired to be, though. So of course I struggled. Can you relate with that too?
Oh, absolutely. What it just made me think about was my original work before I realized I was highly sensitive was about stress. So listening to you share, it's about knowing what your self-nurturing looks like. And I realized after I did a lot of research on stress was I needed more space. I needed more time. I needed to pay attention to what I was doing and how I felt. And I think as you're talking, you tapped into your own body's wisdom and you trusted, which highly sensitive. We have that on this spiritual path. We have that trust, that knowing. It comes so much easier, I think, to many of us who are highly sensitive because we're so aware, but we don't always trust it, as you took time to say, oh, I can do this, but I have to do it in a way that works for me.
Yeah, and that trust thing's a big thing, because the world programs all of us, to push, strive, chase, go after, that our whole value is in doing and accomplishing. And I had to strip that all down. And yeah, I won numerous awards in my other business that I started 30 years ago. But at what cost? It was the cost to my soul. Now, I didn't use that language back then, Bonnie, because I wasn't on that path.
Yeah.
But I look now and go, listen, I was ignoring my physical body. I was ignoring my emotional, spiritual needs. Was I successful in the eyes of the world? Yeah, I won numerous business awards, including the Small Business Administration's awards. But I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't happy. I was physically and emotionally exhausted all the time, but that was success.
Yeah.
And I had to define success for me. And I did that by going from the inside out instead of the outside in. And that's what I teach my clients is success, abundance, joy, love, inner peace comes from working from the inside out. And it sounds like you found that too in your transition from the work, that you're about the spaciousness in showing other women in your circles that they are not their labels, that they can make choices that nurture them.
Absolutely. It's so true that what you're saying, and the world isn't created for any of us to be able to have what we're talking about unless we create it for ourselves from the inside out. And you make up such a good point. Those of us who are on the spiritual path have the intuition, those who are highly sensitive, we see what's needed. And I think that was the other piece of my passion. We're so geared to make changes, but we have to work with ourselves first before we can take that inspired action or work with others. And we're always evolving, as you and I have talked about. But for our world to be different than that push, competitive, money is the only important thing. And I'm not saying we don't need money. We certainly do right in this red hot moment, right? But to look at our needs being met in ways as we trust ourselves and know that what's important. And I don't know if I was talking with you or somebody else. We were just talking about how sometimes just being there in the grocery line, and for many intuitives and highly sensitive people, we're the ones that they talk to without much soliciting.
Exactly. Like Dana, I'm just laughing because you said that. I had that experience many years ago, about 20 years ago, when I first started doing my spiritual practice with energy. And it was a situation in a grocery line where I saw the energy, the negative energy, moving down the line. I felt it. And I had just started the work and I was like, I am not going to be that energy. And it was all because the first person was upset with the cashier making mistakes. But one of the things that just made me giggle is when I lost my darn train of thought. Let's take a break. We're going to take our next break. We come back. I was so excited because of the direction we were going. So we're going to take a break, everyone. Please visit Bonnie at diamondpathways.com. We'll be back in a moment and I'll remember what I was going to say.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Do you wake up every day feeling passionately aligned with your goals and dreams? If not, you could be experiencing some emotional or energetic blocks. Cynthia Medina, certified transformational life and health coach and energy practitioner, has been dedicated to the emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being of women for over 20 years. She combines her intuitive knowledge and in-depth training in Ayurveda, naturopathy, meditation, NLP, Reiki, hypnosis, and more to support women to break through emotional and energetic blocks to healing and success. Cynthia is passionate about working with women ready to elevate their self-worth, self-esteem, energy, and health, and who are interested in learning how to create an optimal life and relationships by incorporating key strategies and mindfulness into their day. Visit CoachCynthiaMedina.com for supportive resources.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No. I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
You're listening to Inspired Conversations. Thanks for being here today with my special guest, Bonnie Snyder of diamondpathways.com. So you were saying something a moment ago about energy and the grocery store line. Complete that thought in that conversation, and I'm sure it will ignite what was coming up for me.
It'll pop back up. Well, my kids are so funny. They say to me, Mom, you have a sticky note on your forehead that says, tell me everything you want to tell me right now. She'll listen.
I love it.
So it is easy sometimes for us to pick those things up, but we have that for ourselves. That's what I think is so amazing, is that that's easy for us versus those who are not as highly sensitive, because that we're so in tune to our hearts and our connection to source and trusting our body. We're here for the future, Linda. We're here to shift the world. I feel like that's why we're here. And maybe this will trigger it, because what I was thinking before was sometimes it's just a smile at someone, or I had a friend call me last night and said, I think you're the one that will understand what I'm going through. And it was actually a paranormal experience. So that part of us that others recognize that sometimes we don't is really important. It's part of our gift.
Oh, it so is. I mean, if I'm sure that what I'm about to share, you can relate to too, because if you asked me 30 years ago, when I got on this path, and I had a vision for my life, it wasn't this. And if you asked me, would you be the creatrix of 5 media brands, be working with spiritual women entrepreneurs, and helping them live from the inside out, live intentional lives, heal their visibility wounds so they can share their gifts? Never in a million years did I envision any of this. It was never a business plan. And that comes to what we were talking about in the earlier segment about trusting my inner guidance, trusting what we receive. So I see now that my own healing journey of discovering my sensitivities, how I navigate the world, I had to go through that healing and that understanding of who I am and how I process energy in order to be prepared for the work that the divine already knew I'd be doing.
Oh,
Do you feel that way too? Like our personal journey is not always easy, right, my friend? But I have no regrets. It led me to the work I'm doing now, and I get to work with some extraordinary women. Does that resonate with your journey?
Oh, absolutely. I look back and think each step prepared me for the next step. And there's no way I would have known. I worked for a psychiatric firm for a while. There's no way I would have known then that I was going to end up becoming a coach and working with women, because I worked a lot with families and children. But everything gave me that background for what I do now with women, and trusting each step. I remember when I left the psychiatric firm, all of a sudden I was separated at the time, and I remember putting my head on the floor and being a testing psychologist. So you took work home because you had to do the report. I remember putting my head on the floor and going, I can't tell people to take 15 or 20 quality minutes time with their children. And I can't do it myself. And my kids were young. I was single. And then my child support paid for the braces on my oldest daughter's teeth. So there wasn't any left over. So I needed to work. But I trusted. And I remember sitting pondering. And what I decided to do was to apply to the school system that I had worked for years before. I didn't get a testing psychology job, but I was able to work for a year, but it gave me time to reevaluate. And I trusted that transition, but I learned so much, Linda, when I was in that firm, and I learned a lot about myself during that time. A foundation, really, having that background as a therapist actually is very helpful for me, myself. I'm always very curious, so I love learning new things. So it just continued me on my journey of learning about myself, about emotions, what are different processes. I can think back through the years of the different people and the different mentors that I've had, which for me, I wanted to listen and learn for me. But what happened was, as you were saying, it helps then as you move forward on your journey professionally. So I am so appreciative of each moment. I remember years ago, you were talking about energy class. It was thought field therapy, and some of the listeners may have heard of it. Most people know of EFT. TFT was the originator, neither right or wrong, good or bad, just that's where it started. And this is so funny how easily, if you're sensitive, you can go into being wrong, which used to be my, modus operandi. But each time we would learn something, I do it with my clients in the counseling practice. And so I would learn the basic step, because you had steps in TFT to do. And then I would stop doing that. I would go to the next piece. So then a group of us as practitioners would meet, and I would tell them what I was doing. And they would go, well, we're still doing that. Linda, I felt like I was wrong, but yet my clients were doing really well. Well, what I learned was I had a gift energetically, and that was my beginning piece. If I hadn't started to learn some of those energy modalities, I don't know as I would understand. One of my gifts is to be able to hold space for people to make that shift. I don't make the shift. I just hold the space, and there's an alchemy. I feel like I'm a catalyst where I'm able to hold that space, and people are able to find what they need to open those doorways. So yes.
It's such a sacred gift that you're giving to others, because they feel so held and so heard. And because you're a highly sensitive also, it's almost like they instantly must feel safe in the circle.
That's the feedback I get, which is really lovely. But I think sometimes we don't recognize those gifts. I've been facilitating a circle for, I think we've been meeting now for 5 years. It's called The Power of 8. And it was within that circle that I really started to realize, because I did a lot of one-to-one, that was a gift that was really important. And it was mirrored to me many, many times. And I finally had to own it. You know how that is. Sometimes people can tell you things, oh, I see this in you, or thank you for this, or you're really great at that. But until we can embody and own it, we can't hear it.
Oh, it's so funny that you said that, because I say this to my clients all the time, and I've had it said to me, is sometimes our sacred gifts are so close to us, they're just part of who we are. We can't see the value. We can't see the transformation it can do for others, because we're so close to it. But when others in our lives, whether it's clients, friends, business partners, mirror and say, oh my goodness, the transformation of what you just did. I remember I used to say, what? I do that all the time. And they're like, yes, Linda, but you don't understand. That's your sacred gift, and you're not owning it and bringing it out so that others can benefit from it. Because to me, it wasn't a gift. It was just, it came very easy to me. So does that relate?
Oh, absolutely. And to me, that's the honoring that you started to realize and honor. And I started in that moment to realize, I knew, as I'm sure you recognize the successes you'd have, I knew with the one-to-one, my clients were doing really well, but I don't think I pinpointed that relationship that we have, that ability to hold that space for that person in a very non-judgmental way. And quite honestly, my counseling practice, it was almost like I had heard it all, as I'm sure you have in the businesses. So nothing really shocked me. But once I'm energetically in that space, I feel like I'm not in my mind, I'm in my heart, but I'm also in a space that's connected with them, so that I can sense what's going on. Everything else fades away. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I want to, I'm careful when I use the word channeling, but it's a channeling of energy, right? It's where the world is used to gathering and people are having mind to mind, ego to ego connections.
Mm-hmm.
In a sacred circle, it's heart to heart. And then the one that's the space holder, like in your circles, you're the space holder. It's like you're so into your heart that the words in guidance that come through is actually coming from your divine source through you into the circle. Is that how you feel? Because it's how I feel. Sometimes I don't remember what I say. And my clients are always, oh my God, you just downloaded my entire branding. And I'm like, well, I'm glad that's on video, because I can't remember what I just told you. Is it ever like that for you?
Oh, yes. It's like if it comes out and then somebody says, well, can you repeat that? Sometimes, as you're saying, I can't, or I can bring bits and pieces of it back. And I like that you said using the word channel carefully, because I'm still in my body. I'm still present and aware, but it's just like you're saying, that divine connection, it just moves through and whatever is needed in that moment. And here, I think this is so important. it's important for us to realize we don't have to be in a sacred circle. It could just be in a conversation. And I had clients several times say to me before I learned the energy work, they would come back and say, wow, what you said made such a difference. And sometimes I would realize it, and sometimes I would not at all. And it wasn't anything for me that might have been very profound, but there was something that I noticed because I learned brain spotting, which is a technique to work with rewiring the brain, that my eyes would go in a certain place when I would be listening to them. So it wasn't that I wasn't paying attention, but I was accessing information and I couldn't see it, but my eyes knew where I needed to go to keep that divine connection. So I found that quite interesting.
And I just love this conversation because the whole reason I wanted you on the show today is I have a large audience of highly sensitives, empaths, intuitives, creatives, right? And I think that's why my audience grew so big, because they're saying, wait a minute, she's authentic, she's vulnerable. I'm pretty open about my journey. They feel the heart-to-heart connection in everything I do, right? So then when I meet women like you, I'm like, oh, I got to get Bonnie out there because they need your love, they need your services, they need your support. So we're going to take a final break, and we'll be back in a moment to talk more about that and so much more. We'll be back in a moment, my friend. You're listening to Inspired Conversations, and with me today is Bonnie Snyder. Be sure to check out our website at diamondpathways.com. We'll be right back.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
You don't have to identify as a creative to reap the benefits of a daily creativity practice. Even 15 minutes a day offers a wealth of benefits to your emotional, physical, social, and spiritual well-being. As a natural-born teacher and facilitator, Cindy Winsell consciously merges her 35 years as an educator with her in-depth training as a certified creative depth coach, certified Zentangle teacher, soul collage facilitator, journey circles facilitator, and moon circles guide to empathically and joyfully guide women to tap into their creativity through expressive arts as tools for healing and transformation. Cindy works with women ready to step into creative exploration as a tool for healing. Together, you will develop your own exciting insights and approaches that will help you awaken to possibility. Visit cindywinsell.com for creative classes and more.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
This is Kathy Beal, host of Celestial Compass, featuring astrology you can use. Celestial Compass points you to what's going on in the sky and what you can do with it down here on Earth. We also explore fun, effective, and cosmic tools for navigating this adventure we call life. Join me the first and third Monday of the month at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for Celestial Compass. It's enlightening, entertaining, and empowering.
The United States has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. At the Equal Justice Initiative, we believe mass incarceration has to end. There is this presumption of dangerousness and guilt that gets assigned to Black and brown people. We have to confront our history of racial injustice and commit to a new era of truth. There's something better waiting for us, something that feels more like freedom. Truth can inspire change. Please learn more at EJI.org.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. So, Bonnie, we were just talking about, I'm trying to think of what direction I want to go back to. We were talking about knowing our gifts, well, not recognizing them in ourselves until maybe someone mirrors back. So what are some ways that we can, or highly sensitives can honor their gifts?
I think what's really important is that nurture part, because I think when we stop and we do whatever it is we need to do to take care of ourselves. And that could be quiet time. It could be eating something healthy. It could be setting a boundary. No, I can't go to that, or that doesn't work for me right now, or setting a boundary with someone who is very toxic for you. And I just lost my train of thought around that. Will you repeat that question again for me?
Yeah, that's okay. How can highly sensitive honor their gifts?
Okay. Yeah. So I think that nurturing is most important. I think if you need information to know if you are, there's so much on the internet right now. Elaine Aron's survey is important. So doing that, because that's an honoring, to take time to look at and to really deeply ponder who you are. Even thinking about, how are you responding in situations? Because we want to honor ourselves. So I will tell you something that happened yesterday in a podcast interview I was doing with somebody and I had to cancel an acupuncture appointment this morning because I just knew from something else I was doing that it just wasn't going to work. And I didn't want to be rushed for this interview. So I apologized, which, I might apologize, but she made such a good point. And I think this is really important, to thank someone for understanding, which I did. I thanked my doctor for understanding that I needed to shift it. But that whole piece of apologizing for who we are, it isn't necessary. We are who we are. Thanking someone for their understanding of us being late, or our understanding of whatever choice we have to make, is really honoring that sense of who we are. And Linda, honestly, I think that's true for everyone, but particularly true for us as highly sensitive women.
So true, because I used to have that tendency of always apologizing, almost like I was always wrong. I was always in shame. And there's such an energy difference when you, like you said, when you change that appointment, that's just what needed to be done. It doesn't make you wrong. There is no reason to apologize. So I get that energetically, because there's a whole generation out there that's all they're saying is, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, especially women.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's almost like you said, they're almost apologizing in different settings and relationships for their existence. And go ahead, Bonnie.
No, that's yes, that's so true. And that's where I think the piece we haven't really talked about is that self-compassion. And that is an honoring of ourselves. It's so easy for us. You're so wonderful with women, and you're understanding and you're compassionate. And I hear that self-compassionate towards yourself. It's important for us to do that for ourselves. It's so easy. And I can speak for myself. So easy for me to be compassionate for others. My husband just looks at me and says, wow, I don't have that kind of patience and compassion. But do we turn it back towards ourselves? Oh, so I screwed up yesterday. Okay. All right. What do I need to do something differently? Or do I just need to have some compassion and love for myself? That's honoring ourselves, just knowing we're not perfect. We're wonderful as human beings. We're on that path. We're striving, as I know many of our listeners are, but that compassion is so important for ourselves.
Oh my goodness. It's been a life changer for me. And you nailed it. And I think it's how women in general are wired. We're givers, we're people pleasers, right? And we're trying to shed some of that. But the compassion for others, you're in some of my circles, so you see how I hold space. Even that same space to myself in my 20s, 30s, and probably even my 40s was like, I was so darn hard on myself. And then I wish I could remember who the quote was, but there's a quote out there, and it said, would you say that to your grandchild or your best friend? And the answer, of course, would be no. And it's like, then you have no right saying it to yourself. Right. So in other words, like, we would never say to a friend, like, I can't believe you had to cancel that acupuncture appointment. Why would you even think of doing that? But that's the inner conversation we have with ourselves sometimes, isn't it?
Oh, so true. And
so that's how I changed it. I said, if someone you loved was the one doing the act, the one that I'm judging, would you say those words to them? And I always go, of course not. And then my soul says to me, then why are you saying it to yourself, darling? That's how I began my journey of self-compassion and releasing self-judgment. is I kept flipping the script. Would I say that to them? Would I say that to them? And you're right. It is so, so darn important.
Well, and that's a perfect way to do it. Would I say it to somebody else? And you're so right. 99% of us would not do that. But part of the wiring of the highly sensitive brain is we tend to ruminate over things. So when we're ruminating, we're not carrying on the conversation you just shared. We have to stop and go back and say, okay, would I say that to somebody else? Just saying, get over it doesn't make the shift, but asking ourselves, would I say that to someone else, and just saying, well, I'll forgive myself if maybe I did say something, because I can tell you, I've said things that, and typically I try to be very careful, respectful, stay within integrity, but we do things sometimes that we wish we didn't.
That's the human journey, right?
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
my commitment, I'd say let's see, my granddaughter's 12, my grandson's going to be 23. I'd say probably about 15 years ago is really for me to choose to live from my heart. So I'm a Scorpio, I'm passionate, I'm creative. And sometimes especially in my young days, I didn't think before I spoke. So sometimes I'd react based on my own emotional wounds and triggers, right? And then when I started the inner work, I said, oh, no, I want to respond, because respond always comes from love. It comes from heart. It comes from empathy and compassion. And so I'd say for the deep dive into that and really reprogramming myself has been a good decade. And I'm going to say it's one of the greatest gifts I gave myself, my family, and to be that mirror for the grandchildren to go, you can be upset and you can be angry, but how you say something to someone can never be taken back.
Yeah,
because there's the energy, right? There's an energy, that wound that's left behind. So I still share my thoughts, but I do it with love and intention. And the difference it made in the family and energetically ripple effect has been powerful. So thank you for even bringing that into our conversation. We have a couple minutes left, but it was beautiful about self-compassion, non-judgment. So Bonnie, in our last few moments, is there anything else aside from the wisdom you've already shared that you want to leave our listeners with?
Just would love that those who suspect or already know that this conversation has helped them recognize that there are gifts, that we are wired differently. Those of us who are highly sensitive actually are really the energy, the strong, very strong energy of positive change on the planet. So everyone is important, whether it's just carrying on conversations or what you do as work in the world. So I think that's what I would like to leave people with, that our gifts are needed and powder puffs are needed.
Yes, they are, my friend.
Because there's strength in that. But thank you so much. I've so enjoyed the conversation. And I do think that deep inner work has actually shifted life for me also so much. And I'm so grateful for it. I'm grateful for where I am. And I wish that for other women also.
Yeah, that's why I hold these conversations. 7 years I've had the show. And yes, I'm having conversation with entrepreneurs, but the conversation is always so much deeper. It's about their intimate personal journey, beliefs, thoughts, and how they transformed their lives that led them to the work they're doing today. So thank you, my friend, for being here, sharing so vulnerably, authentically, and for the sacred work you're doing in the world to support women. I'm so honored that our paths have crossed.
Well, I feel the same, Linda. I feel so blessed having met you, and the work that you're doing is so needed.
Well, thank you, my friend. And I want to invite everyone, be sure to visit Bonnie at diamondpathways.com, listen to her podcast. You can find all the links and everything else at diamondpathways.com. Until next time, my friends, choose love, choose joy, choose happiness. Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.